malted barley to it. There's an enzyme in the malted barley that converts the starch from the corn into sugar. And they basically smash things down in there and they create this kind of juice, which then is put outside in the back in our fermentation tanks where we add something that's called distiller's yeast, which is like baker's yeast. And we let that sit there for about 5 days. After that, we now have something that we call distiller's beer, which is basically just like fermented corn beer. That's brought inside, thrown into this Vendom still over here. And this is what we use to do what we call the stripping run. So the stripping run is when you pull all the alcohol that you can out of that distiller's beer. And so they'll heat this thing up with boiling water. And then because alcohol has a lower boiling point than water, these vapors travel up. They go through this like swan neck, which is a sort of connecting tube, comes back down and it hits a condenser where it's exposed to cold air. The vapors turn back into a liquid and we produce something that's called the low wines. It's like 20 to 30 proof. It's not really strong enough to call it anything. But that's what then gets thrown into these copper pot stills right here. And that's where we begin a process that's called the spirit run. During the spirit run is when we're gonna make what's known as cuts. So there's 4 cuts to the process. There's the heads, well there's the foreshots, the heads, the hearts, and the tails. And these cuts really help us identify where we are in the distilling process because we're only gonna siphon off a specific cut. We're only after the hearts. Basically with bourbon, it has to be distilled at 160 proof or below. So we need to wait for that proof to cool down. What's that? Yeah. But they do that with these hydrometers right over here. And so they're basically taking the temperature of the proof. And when it's coming off of the still, you know, if it's coming off between 150 to 160 proof, we know, okay, these are our hearts. This is what we can sort of pull off and proof down with water to eventually become the moonshine, which is what you guys all just tried. I think they're on the tails. I think they're at the end of the run right now. Typically these stills are standing up vertically, but because of the doors of the building, they had to turn it on its side. These stills right here are traditional Scottish copper pot stills from Forsyth in Scotland. Their names allegedly are Dumbo and Maeve. I don't know who those people are, but that's who they are. And yeah, I think let's go upstairs. Let's go check it out. Mail time. Water. Here we are. So this is the barrel room. This is where we do some of our aging, but pretty much everything we have is stored somewhere else in a facility in Patchogue, Long Island. We are, however, actively aging barrels in this room. Now, there are rules that apply to bourbon that don't necessarily apply to all spirits. All bourbon is whiskey, not all whiskey is bourbon. If you want to call anything whiskey, it means that you're using cereal grains, so something like barley, wheat, rye. If you want to call anything bourbon, it has to be made with majority corn. So it's got to be at least 51% corn or more. It needs to be made anywhere in the United States. A lot of times people think that bourbon has to come from Kentucky. Common misconception, it does not. Anywhere in the US will suffice. It's sort of like what makes it a distinctly American product. It's our version of Scotch. It's our version of champagne. Even though every time I say that, somebody is like, is it though? But speaking of America, it needs to be stored in a brand new, unused white American oak barrel that has been exposed to flame or has been charred on the inside. And that charring really functions as like a filtration system. So basically what happens is liquid goes into these barrels, it gets hot, these barrels expand, and liquid is pulled into the barrels. Then when it's cold, these barrels will contract and liquid will sort of push back out. So it's actually this like push and pull, this journey that the liquid is going on that gives it its color, its flavor, its aroma, everything about it that makes it it. You legally can't add anything to bourbon other than water or more bourbon. And so any kind of sweet notes that you get come from naturally occurring wood sugars and compounds and tannins that get released in the oak. There's a compound that is known as vanillin that you'll find in something like vanilla extract flavoring, and that's actually present in white oak. And so that's where you get that vanilla note that bourbon is really typically kind of known for. Now I'm gonna pass this around. This in my hands is called a stave. All of these barrels are made up of individual staves that are sort of pressurized together. There's no glue holding these things together. The line on the side that you can see is known as the red line or the devil's cut. It's the last amount of booze that's stuck in the barrel. You don't actually want to drink the devil's cut. There's like a Mila Kunis commercial. She's like walking around smacking barrels being like, the devil's cut, like we squeezed the last bit of booze out. Disgusting, okay? It's gonna taste like a pencil. But marketing is an incredible tool, and we'll sort of get into that in a sec. But speaking of the devil's cut, there's something that's also known as the angel share. And this refers to all of the water that evaporates out of all of these barrels. At one point, people would open their barrels up and find that a lot of liquid was missing. And the explanation was that angels were coming down and drinking the booze. I don't know, maybe. I wasn't here, so I'm not gonna like, if somebody believes that, I'm like, cool, whatever, yeah, your truth, baby. But you know, evaporation is definitely happening. And so you're losing about 15% to the angel share per barrel. The hotter the summer, the more water you lose to the angel share, which means the higher proof the barrel will be at the end of the day. We do not do temperature control in here. So that means when it's hot, it's hot. When it's cold, we let it do its thing. Congratulations to all of you on coming on like a good day, because people show up here in the summer being like, woo, Distillery. And I'm like, yes, 115 degrees downstairs. It's brutal. And usually we'll shut the door behind us. So you guys all crushed it today. But yeah, no temperature control in here. We just sort of let it do its thing, because that fluctuation is actually, you know, going to help these barrels expand and contract and provide really interesting, sort of unique dynamic flavor. Now with bourbon, because you can only use the barrel one time, we really want to make the most of it. Technically, I could take something from downstairs, throw it into a barrel, take it out after 30 seconds. I've done it. It qualifies as bourbon. But I'm wasting my money. These go between $300 to $500 per barrel. And this is what it looks like when something sits inside of a barrel for just a day, 2 days, a month, a year, 2.5 years. So number one is gonna look and taste like the moonshine that you guys had downstairs. This last one's gonna look like and taste like a bourbon that you actually hopefully will want to drink. Just, you know, you're not after that really, unless you're making moonshine. So we really wanna make the most out of it. 2 years is sort of the minimum we're gonna let anything sit inside of a barrel. When we're done with the barrels though, we typically sell them to Scotch companies, wine companies, Etsy distributors, or they like it, they like the barrels. We make earrings that we sell in the gift shop. So get your mom a gift. Mother's Day is coming up. So yeah. Now, everything that you guys drink is pretty much a combination of multiple barrels that are put together to make that blend. We actually have one of our blenders, he's out here, he's doing a barrel pick in a little bit, but he's sort of walking around. And basically their job is to make the best combinations of barrels for blends. They're after a very specific taste. So the idea is that they're blending something that tastes the same consistently from year to year to year. When you see something that says it's a single barrel release, basically what that means is that this one barrel is good enough to sort of like stand on its own. It doesn't need any other barrel to come in and kind of round out that flavor. So it'll probably be pretty expensive because there's only so many bottles that you can yield from a single barrel. With that being said, if you can't try something before you buy something, maybe think about it. Drinking really is about personal preference. It's like art and music and fashion. What you like is what you like, period, end of story. A lot of times price these days is a lot more reflective of supply and demand as opposed to actual quality of spirit. There are plenty of things that you can find for like $20 that are good to drink. And I just feel like we all need to be like the #1 judges of our own tastes. You know, all these like really cool whiskey clubs were born during the pandemic. But again, it really sort of contributed to this sort of like supply and demand, like this scarcity feeling of like, gotta get my hands on that bottle. When, you know, you can kind of learn how whiskeys have very similar, if not identical, mash bills or split of ingredients as, you know, cheaper whiskeys. So it's just like sort of something to keep in your mind. But yeah, we don't do anything with these barrels. We just let them lay here like this. You know, some places will shake them. Sometimes a company will play rock music to them, you know, like Metallica. Jefferson's takes it out to sea. That's cool. Again, marketing is incredible. There's really no way to prove that doing any of those things is doing anything to your bourbon, but you know, what you're experiencing and what you're drinking and feeling is totally valid. So I don't want to like deny anybody's experiences. But yeah, I think like sort of a really good way to think about the aging process is when you think about the way that fruit grows on a tree. So everything's going to come from the same source, but just how every piece of fruit tastes different. Every single barrel tastes different, and that's sort of like what's so fun about all of it. So that's what makes blending such a difficult art. They do a lot of tasting, but also most of it is by sense of smell. So you gotta really get a good nose. I'm not that girl. But any questions about sort of like what's happening in here so far before we sit and have a little drink together?
Did you say there was a bigger barrel storage location?
Yes, yeah, pretty much everything is stored in Long Island. There's about 175 barrels aging in here. Most of our specialty barrels come out of this room because this room specifically has the biggest temperature fluctuation. Like I've been told that the blenders can tell where the barrels are, like what facility they're being aged in. And this room is pretty distinct because it gets a lot of sun exposure and it's over all the distilling that's happening downstairs. So I feel like it's just naturally way hotter up here than typical, rick houses would be. But yeah, pretty much everything somewhere else in a boring old rick house that we don't get to go to.
Do you know if they do any barrel rotations in that house, or is it also leave it still?
I think it's for the most part pretty much like this. Yeah, we are not like doing a lot of that. That's not to say that they won't experiment with things like that. Because we are a craft distillery, they really do actually have a lot of opportunities to play around with things like that. But it's definitely not, like we're not known for that, you know,
okay.
Yeah. Anybody else? Wow,
I see
speechless.
116 proof, is that the entry proof for all the barrels?
It is, so anytime you see like the proof on here, you can see these are 116. I'm pretty sure these are 125. So bourbon legally has to be entered into the barrel at 125 proof or below. These were intentionally entering in even lower than that because we know they're gonna gain proof the longer they sit in that barrel anyway. Right here we're making single malt, which is sort of our version of a Scotch. We're not in Scotland, so we can't call it that, but we can pretty much do the same thing and slap an American single malt right on the front of that label. And so, yes, for that purpose, we are reusing our own previously used barrels. But yeah, any person who like entered the barrel in, their name is on the barrel somewhere. FPDC was Fernando. He really got wild with it on some of these. Like he started drawing these crests and I was like, okay. But I haven't met most of these people that have entered these in. I've been here about 3 years and like, it's pretty common that someone will put something in and then, you know, some of these barrels are 10 years old already and
Wow.
yeah, I'll never see them. Yeah, we got a 10-year-old right over there, just about. Got some stuff from when we first moved in. We just celebrated 15 years, which is a pretty big deal for us. You know, small craft. Somehow we made it through the pandemic. But yeah, it's hard. Liquor is having a moment, and it's not a good moment. It's like everyone's like, we're good on this. So keep drinking.